Okay, the first thing that everybody needs to remember for their exam is that, according to the Bible, humans and only humans are made in God's image. Now, that's an incredibly important thing to remember because it can be used in practically every question that you answer in your exam. If you are asked, what would religious people think about abortion or prejudice or war, you can always mention that people are made in God's image and that only humans are made in God's image. Now, what does it mean to be in God's image? Well, if you say a child is in its parent's image, you mean it looks like the parent, but that can't be what being in God's image refers to. Because the Bible is very clear that God is not physical. God made everything else that exists. So if you go through Genesis chapter 1 where God makes the world, God makes the light and he makes the darkness and he makes the water and he makes the sky and he makes the animals. He makes all these things, which means God's not like those things. God is not physically like anything in the universe. God is not physical. God does not have a body. And we do have a body. So being in God's image does not mean that we look like God, but we do resemble him in an important way. And that is, we're personal. We are persons. We can have relationships. And that's the most important thing about being in God's image. We can have relationships. We can have a relationship with God. We were made to have a relationship with God. Now, if God is the creator of everything else that exists, and if God keeps everything else that exists in existence, in other words, if God keeps this universe in existence from minute to minute to minute, it means that if there was no God, nothing else would exist. So if there's no creator, nothing else exists. That means that God is, just as a matter of brute fact, the most important thing that exists. God is the most important thing that exists because if he didn't exist, nothing else would exist. He's the most important thing there is. And we were made by him to have a relationship with him. So we were made with a purpose and a meaning by God, no matter how small we are compared to everything else in the universe. Each individual human being was made by him to have a relationship with him. So that's the most important thing that you can take into your exam with you. We are important, not necessarily because of who we are, but because of who made us and the purpose that he gave us and the fact that we can be in a relationship with him. So humans can have relationships because they are in God's image. That's how we are like God. He can have relationships. We can have a relationship with him. But if we can have relationships, we can have relationships with God, but we can also have relationships with each other, and we can have a relationship with the world around us. Now, not in the sense of a friendship, but in the sense of having responsibilities. Because being in God's image means that we are stewards, stewards, not stewards, stewards. Steward just means a servant. Being in God's image on earth means that we are God's representatives on earth. We are meant to do his work here. And that means taking care of this world around us. So we have responsibilities to animals. We have responsibilities to the environment. In other words, we have responsibilities to other living things. Even though we're not in a personal relationship with them, they are not our deepest friends, they're not on the level of family, but we still do have a relationship with them. So being in God's image means that we're important and that each individual person is important because of who made us. But it also means that we have responsibilities because of our relationships. We have a relationship with all living things, and we've got a responsibility because God put us here to take care of them. Here's the third thing that we need to keep in our heads when you're doing your exam, and that's the idea of sin. Sin is the idea that every single human being has turned away from that relationship with God. Now, we have all turned away. Every human being. Because we have all turned away from God, nobody gets to judge anybody else. Nobody gets to look down their nose at anybody else. Nobody gets to say that they are more important than anybody else, because every single one of us has done the worst thing that you really can do, and that is turn away from God. If God is the most important thing there is, and each of us at some stage in our life doesn't want Him looking at us, doesn't want Him knowing what we're doing, wants to do our own thing, doesn't want God telling us what to do, then each and every single one of us has turned away from the thing that gives the whole universe life. We've turned away from our responsibilities. We've turned away from the source of all love, and so we've all done something terrible. But that means that we don't get to look down our nose at anyone else. We don't get to do that. And that's very important when you're doing questions on prejudice and discrimination. And when we're looking at also at the question of war. In prejudice and discrimination, different groups judge each other because they want to feel better than other people. They want to look down their noses at other people. They want to feel power over other people. If you are a Christian, you cannot do that, because part of being a Christian is saying, listen, I confess, I believe that every human being has done something terrible, that's turn away from God. Now, if you're a human being, you're saying, listen, I've done the worst thing there is along with everyone else. And that means you should not be proud. You should not look down on others. It also means turning away from God also means that you've turned away from your relationship with this world around us. We've turned away from our responsibilities. And if you look at how we live with the world around us, if you look at how we live with animals, for example, we overfarm them. We farm animals out of greed. We farm animals because we want more food or because we want to make more money, and we don't care about how we treat them. We don't care about what we're doing to the planet around us because we want to make money, we want control. So we're out of a relationship, out of a right relationship with the world around us. And then finally, we have to remember that in Christianity, God the Son died for every single one of us, every single individual human being, and rose again for the whole universe. So the idea is that Jesus Christ died so that we could be forgiven. Now that tells us that, yes, everyone has done something terrible. If that's what it takes for God to fix the problem, His own Son has to die. But it also puts a price on us. What are you worth? Well, what's a painting worth? You can go to an auction and see people spend millions of pounds on a bit of paint splashed on some canvas. Now, the paint would be worth a few pence if you were to buy it in the shop, and the canvas might be worth a few pounds if you were to buy it on the shop. So the material in the piece of art is not worth that much. But because of who has painted that material, because of the person who made and created this painting, all of a sudden it becomes worth a huge amount of money. Now, what are you worth? You're worth the price that God paid to bring you back to Him. You're free to reject that, but if you want to, you're worth the price that God paid to bring you back to Him. And that means that if you are brought back to Him and you accept that, then you're part of a community of people, you're part of a group of people who've accepted God's love, and the price on you is the same as on everybody else who accept God's love. Paul said in Galatians, there is neither slave nor free, nor male nor female, all are one in Christ. And what he was saying is, listen, if you're a Christian, you've got to say that yes, everyone's a sinner, nobody gets to look down their nose at everyone else. But when you're a Christian, you're not better than everyone else, because the same price has been put on your head as everyone around you. This is the value that God places on you. And when you become a Christian, you're not allowed to treat other people different just because you're a Christian. You're meant to share God's love with them, convince those who aren't Christian to become Christian, and treat everybody who has accepted Christ the same, because there's to be no difference between you all. So, we're in God's image, which makes us important. Being in God's image means that we're in a relationship with others. with the world around us, and we can be in a relationship with God. Everyone has sinned. That is, they've turned away from God. And if you like, that's what's wrong with the world. We have turned away from God, and that affects our relationships with everyone. And finally, Jesus died for everyone to fix the problem. And that means that nobody gets to look down their nose at everyone else, at anyone else. Everyone is equal before God.